Marcus Hill was 38 years old when he realized he had spent almost half his life working hard without actually getting anywhere. From the outside, nobody would have guessed it. He lived in a decent neighborhood outside Dallas, drove a leased black SUV, wore clean button-down shirts every morning, and posted smiling family photos every Christmas like everybody else. His wife Alina worked part-time at a dental office. Their son played Little League baseball, and every Friday night they ordered takeout and watched movies in the living room. To most people, Marcus looked stable. But stability and wealth are two completely different things. Marcus learned that the hard way. Every morning at 5:45 a.m., his alarm exploded beside his bed like a fire siren. He would slap the phone screen, stare at the dark ceiling for a few seconds, then slowly drag himself into another day he didn't actually control. By 6:30, he was sitting in traffic with a travel mug full of burnt gas station coffee, listening to financial podcasts hosted by millionaires telling listeners to wake up early and grind harder. The thing was, Marcus already worked hard. He worked harder than almost everyone he knew. He managed regional logistics for a retail distribution company. Long hours, endless emails, constant emergencies, truck delays, payroll issues, angry clients, meetings that could have been emails. He averaged 60 hours a week and still felt like he was drowning financially. One Tuesday morning, while sitting in traffic under a gray Texas sky, Marcus checked his bank account at a red light. $217. That was all he had left until payday. His mortgage payment was due in 4 days. His son needed new cleats. His wife had been quietly mentioning that their water heater sounded strange, and his credit card balance sat at nearly $18,000. Marcus locked his phone and stared through the windshield. "How is this possible?" he whispered to himself. He made over $100,000 a year. 10 years earlier, if someone had told the younger version of Marcus he'd someday make 6 figures, he would have imagined freedom. Big savings account, investments, vacations without stress, a paid-off home someday. Instead, every month felt like survival. And the worst part, nobody around him talked about it honestly. At work, people pretended everything was fine. On social media, everybody looked rich. Friends bought boats, upgraded kitchens, posted vacation pictures in Mexico, financed luxury trucks they definitely couldn't afford. America had become a giant performance. Everybody wanted to look wealthy. Very few people were actually building wealth. Marcus didn't fully understand the difference yet, but life was about to teach him. That same week, Marcus attended a company retirement dinner for a man named Walter Jennings. Walter had worked at the company for 42 years. Quiet guy, never flashy. Drove the same old silver Toyota for over a decade. Brought homemade sandwiches to work instead of eating out. People joked that Walter was cheap. At the retirement party, the CEO gave a speech praising Walter's loyalty. Everyone clapped politely, ate dry chicken breast, and checked their phones under the table. Then something happened Marcus never forgot. After the speeches ended, Marcus ended up standing beside Walter near the coffee station. "You excited?" Marcus asked. Walter smiled calmly, more relieved than excited. Marcus laughed. "Yeah, I bet." Then Walter said something strange. "You know what the biggest financial mistake people make is?" Marcus shrugged. "Credit cards?" "No," Walter replied. "They spend their lives buying things to impress people who are just as broke as they are." Marcus chuckled awkwardly. But Walter kept talking. "Most people think wealth is about income. It's not. Wealth is what you keep. Wealth is ownership. Wealth is time. Wealth is freedom." Marcus nodded politely, but honestly the words didn't fully land. Then Walter added something that hit harder. "I made less money than most managers here, but I invested every month for 40 years, quietly." Marcus looked at him. "How much did you retire with?" Walter sipped his coffee. "A little over $4 million. Marcus almost dropped his cup. $4 million. This quiet old man with the faded Toyota and homemade sandwiches had more money than the executives everyone admired. Marcus suddenly felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Because deep down, he realized something terrifying. He had spent years trying to look successful instead of becoming financially secure. That conversation stayed in Marcus's head for weeks. At first, he tried ignoring it, but once you see the truth, it becomes impossible to unsee. He started noticing everything differently. The massive car payments, the endless Amazon packages arriving at neighbors' doors, the expensive watches worn by coworkers drowning in debt, The way people celebrated pay raises by increasing expenses immediately. Nobody built margins anymore, they built appearances. Marcus went home one night and opened every financial statement he could find: credit cards, car lease, mortgage, student loans, subscriptions, insurance payments. The number shocked him. Every month, nearly 92% of his income disappeared automatically, not because he was starving, not because he lacked opportunity, because his lifestyle had expanded every single time his income grew. That was the trap. The American system quietly trained people to increase spending faster than wealth. Bigger paycheck, get a nicer car, promotion, upgrade the neighborhood, bonus, take a luxury vacation. Nobody taught people to buy assets, nobody taught people patience, and almost nobody taught delayed gratification anymore. Marcus stayed awake until nearly 2 a.m. staring at spreadsheets. For the first time in years, he told himself the truth. I'm broke. Not poor, broke. There's a difference. Poor can be temporary. Broke is often a mindset disguised as normal life. The next morning, Marcus made coffee at home instead of stopping at Starbucks. Tiny decision, almost meaningless, but psychologically it mattered, because for the first time in years, he was acting intentionally instead of emotionally. Over the next few months, Marcus became obsessed with understanding money, real money. Not social media fantasy wealth, not fake entrepreneur videos rented beside Lamborghinis, real wealth. He read books during lunch breaks instead of scrolling his phone. He listened to interviews with investors while driving. He studied compound interest, tax structures, real estate, business ownership, index funds. And one brutal truth kept appearing over and over again: most people never build wealth because they're trained to consume instead of own. Marcus realized his entire life had been built around consumption. He consumed entertainment, consumed products, consumed upgrades, consumed convenience. Every advertisement in America screamed the same message 24 hours a day: you deserve this. But nobody asked whether those purchases were stealing future freedom. One evening, Marcus sat with Alina at the kitchen table after their son went to sleep. We need to talk, he said quietly. She looked nervous immediately. What happened? We're not building a future, Marcus admitted. We're surviving month to month pretending we're okay. Alina didn't argue because she already knew. She had been quietly worried for years. That night became the turning point of their marriage and finances. Together, they made painful decisions. They sold the SUV and bought a used Honda, canceled subscriptions, stopped eating out constantly, sold expensive furniture they bought mostly for appearances. Marcus even sold his luxury watch online. Friends noticed immediately. One coworker laughed when Marcus pulled into work driving the older car. Tough times, he joked. Marcus forced a smile, but internally something had changed. For years, he needed approval. Now he wanted freedom, and freedom requires sacrifice most people refuse to make. The first year was brutal. Marcus felt embarrassed sometimes, ashamed even. Social pressure is powerful. People will congratulate you for buying things that quietly destroy your financial future, but they'll question you the second you become disciplined. That's how backwards society became. Still, Marcus stayed focused. Every extra dollar went toward debt or investments. Slowly, things began changing. The credit card balance dropped. Emergency savings grew. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus had breathing room, and with breathing room came clarity. He started noticing another reason most people never build wealth: fear, not lack of intelligence, not lack of opportunity. Fear. People feared looking different, feared taking financial risks. Feared investing because they might lose money, feared starting businesses because they might fail, feared leaving comfortable misery. Marcus understood that fear deeply because he lived with it every day. 3 years later, Marcus had completely transformed his finances, not through luck, not through crypto gambling, not through some secret online course, through consistency, discipline, patience, things modern culture hates. By 41, he had eliminated all consumer debt except the mortgage. His investment accounts crossed $200,000 and something unexpected happened. His stress levels dropped dramatically. Money problems affect everything: sleep, marriage, confidence. Mental health. When people live financially stretched for years, they normalize anxiety. Marcus used to think stress was adulthood. Now he realized much of it came from financial chaos. One afternoon, Marcus met an old college friend named Derek for lunch. Derek arrived wearing designer sunglasses and bragging about a new $80,000 truck he had financed. "Man, you gotta enjoy life," Derek said, while ordering expensive whiskey in the middle of the afternoon. Marcus smiled politely. Then Derek casually admitted he had almost no retirement savings. "No point thinking that far ahead," he laughed. "You could die tomorrow." Marcus had heard that phrase his whole life. You could die tomorrow. What people ignored was the other possibility. You could live another 40 years completely unprepared. That terrified Marcus more. A few months later, the company Marcus worked for announced layoffs. Entire departments disappeared overnight. Panic exploded across the office. People whispered in hallways. Employees cried in parking lots. Managers held emergency meetings pretending everything was under control. Years earlier, Marcus would have panicked too, but this time was different. For the first time in his life, he had options. Savings, investments, lower expenses, margin. He wasn't trapped anymore. That's when Marcus finally understood what wealth truly is. Wealth is not flashy cars, not designer clothes, not pretending to be rich online. Wealth is the ability to survive without desperation. It's the ability to say no, the ability to walk away, the ability to breathe. Marcus survived the layoffs, but something inside him changed permanently. He no longer wanted to spend his entire life making someone else rich. So at 42 years old, he started a small logistics consulting business from home. Nothing glamorous, no viral startup story, no overnight success. Just years of experience solving problems companies paid for. The first year, he barely made profit. The second year improved slightly. By the third year, he earned more than his old corporate salary while working fewer hours. But the biggest difference wasn't income, it was ownership. For the first time in his life, Marcus owned his time. He ate breakfast with his son, worked from a home office, took walks during afternoons, visited his mother more often. Money became less about status and more about control over life itself, and that's the part most people never understand. Wealth is not really about buying more, it's about needing less. One evening, Marcus stood outside his house watching the sunset spill orange light across the neighborhood. Kids rode bikes down the sidewalk. Sprinklers clicked across green lawns. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked endlessly. Alina stepped beside him holding 2 cups of coffee. "You seem happier lately," she said. Marcus smiled. "For years I thought rich people had better stuff," he admitted. "Now I think they just have less fear." Alina nodded slowly, because she understood exactly what he meant. Fear of bills, fear of emergencies, fear of losing jobs, fear of retirement. Fear controls millions of people silently every day. And consumer culture feeds that fear constantly. Buy more, upgrade more, spend more, stay dependent. Marcus eventually became the kind of man younger employees started asking for advice. Funny enough, nobody cared about his opinions back when he looked successful. But once he became calm, confident, and financially secure, people noticed. One younger coworker asked him something important one day. "What's the real secret to building wealth?" Marcus thought for a moment. Then he answered honestly. "Most people are addicted to immediate rewards." The younger man looked confused. Marcus continued. "Building wealth is usually boring, slow investing, living below your means, repeating simple habits for decades. But people want excitement. They want shortcuts. They want the appearance of success immediately." That was the truth nobody wanted to hear. Wealth often looks boring in real life. Discipline looks boring, patience looks boring, consistency looks boring, but financial desperation is dramatic, and modern culture rewards drama. Marcus learned another painful lesson too. A lot of people secretly don't want financial freedom badly enough to endure temporary discomfort. They say they want wealth. But they also want luxury immediately. They want expensive lifestyles before building financial foundations. That contradiction destroys people for decades. At 45 years old, Marcus sat inside a quiet coffee shop reviewing investment statements while rain tapped softly against the windows. Nearly $1 million, not inherited, not one. Built slowly, patiently, ordinary decisions repeated for years, and that realization almost made him emotional because Marcus was not special. He wasn't a genius investor. He didn't invent technology. He wasn't famous, which meant something powerful. If an ordinary stressed-out employee drowning in debt could slowly change his life. Maybe millions of other people could too, but most wouldn't, not because they lacked ability, because the system of modern life constantly pushes people away from long-term thinking. Advertisements convince people they are incomplete without purchases. Social media turns lifestyles into competition. Debt becomes normalized. Patience becomes old-fashioned. and discipline becomes rare. One Sunday afternoon, Marcus cleaned out boxes in his garage and found an old photo of himself from years earlier, standing beside the leased SUV. Expensive watch on his wrist, big smile. Back then he thought he looked wealthy. Now he saw something else. A man exhausted from trying to maintain an image. Marcus stared at the picture quietly for a long time. Then he laughed softly to himself. Because the real reason most people never build wealth has almost nothing to do with intelligence. It's because they spend too much energy trying to look rich instead of becoming financially free. That difference changes everything. Looking rich attracts attention. Building wealth requires invisibility for long periods of time. Looking rich depends on other people's opinions. Building wealth depends on personal discipline. Looking rich happens fast. Building wealth happens slowly, and most people simply cannot tolerate slow progress anymore. They quit too early, spend too quickly, panic too easily, or compare themselves endlessly to people online living fake lives. Marcus eventually taught his son the lessons he wished someone had taught him earlier. "How much you make matters," he told him one day, "but how much you keep matters more." His son nodded while pretending not to care like teenagers often do, but Marcus hoped the lesson would stay buried somewhere in his mind until adulthood, because financial education changes generations. Not instantly, but permanently. At 50 years old, Marcus and Alina took a quiet vacation to the mountains of Colorado. Nothing extravagant, no luxury resort, just a peaceful cabin surrounded by pine trees and silence. One morning, Marcus sat alone on the porch watching fog move through the forest. No traffic, no debt collectors, no panic, no pretending, just peace. And that peace felt more luxurious than anything money had ever purchased before. Marcus realized then that wealth was never really the goal. Freedom was, the freedom to choose your time, the freedom to sleep without fear. The freedom to stop performing for society. Most people spend their entire lives chasing symbols of success while quietly sacrificing the very freedom they actually want. And by the time they realize it, decades are gone. That is the real tragedy, not being poor, not failing, but spending an entire lifetime trapped in a cycle of earning and spending without ever truly owning your life. Marcus finished his coffee as cold mountain air drifted across the porch. Then he smiled to himself, because after years of stress, mistakes, debt, and chasing appearances, he finally understood something simple. Wealth is not about having more than other people. It's about finally needing less from the world to feel at peace.